Deuteronomy 7. Deuteronomy 7, I want to begin reading in verse 6. For you are a holy people to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his own possession out of all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. The Lord did not set his love on you, nor choose you because you were more in number than any of the peoples, for you were the fewest of all peoples, but because the Lord loved you and kept the oath which he swore to your forefathers. The Lord brought you out by a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of slavery, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Know therefore that the Lord your God, he is God, the faithful God, who keeps his covenant and his loving kindness to 1,000th generation with those who love him and keep his commandments, but repays those who hate him to their faces, to destroy them. He will not delay with him who hates him. He will repay him to his face. Therefore, you shall keep the commandment and the statutes and the judgments which I am commanding you today to do them. Then it shall come about, because you listen to these judgments and keep and do them, that the Lord your God will keep with you his covenant and his loving kindness which he swore to your forefathers. He will love you and bless you and multiply you. He will also bless the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your ground, your grain and your new wine and your oil, the increase of your herd and the young of your flock in the land which he swore to your forefathers to give you. You shall be blessed above all peoples. There will be no male or female barren among you or among your cattle. The Lord will remove from you all sickness, and he will not put on you any of the harmful diseases of Egypt, which you have known, but he will lay them on all who hate you. You shall consume all the peoples whom the Lord your God will deliver to you. Your eye shall not pity them, nor shall you serve their gods, for that would be a snare to you. If you should say in your heart, these nations are greater than I, how can I dispossess them? You shall not be afraid of them. You shall well remember what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all Egypt, the great trials which your eyes saw, and the signs and the wonders and the mighty hand and the outstretched arm by which the Lord your God brought you out. So shall the Lord your God do to all the peoples of whom you are afraid. Moreover, the Lord your God will send the hornet against them until those who are left and hide themselves from you perish. You shall not dread them, for the Lord your God is in your midst, a great and awesome God. The Lord your God will clear away these nations before you, little by little. You will not be able to put an end to them quickly, for the wild beast would grow too numerous for you. But the Lord your God will deliver them before you, and you will throw them into great confusion until they are destroyed. He will deliver their kings into your hand, so that you will make their name perish from under heaven. No man will be able to stand before you until you have destroyed them. The graven images of their gods you are to burn with fire. You shall not covet the silver or the gold that is on them, nor take it for yourselves, or you will be snared by it. For it is an abomination to the Lord your God. You shall not bring an abomination into your house, and like it come under the ban. You shall utterly detest it, and you shall utterly abhor it, for it is something banned. And the commandments that I am commanding you today, you shall be careful to do, that you may live and multiply and go in and possess the land which the Lord swore to give to your forefathers. You shall remember all the way which the Lord your God has led you in the wilderness these 40 years, that he might humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. He humbled you and let you be hungry and fed you with manna which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you understand that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by everything that proceeds out of the mouth of the Lord. Your clothing did not wear out on you, nor did your foot swell these 40 years. Thus you are to know in your heart that the Lord your God was disciplining you just as a man disciplines his son. Therefore you shall keep the commandments of the Lord your God to walk in his ways and to fear him. We'll stop there. In chapter 7, particularly from verse 12 through about verse 16, you have God mentioning promised blessings. Here's what I'm going to do when we enter the land. So these all look forward to the future as they enter into the promised land. In chapter 8 especially, you have remembered blessings. Here's what God did. Here's how he took care of you. So all looking back. What's promised ahead of you, what has already occurred. He fed you with manna. He didn't let the clothing wear out on you. Your feet didn't swell. All these things that God did in caring for them. Between those two mentioned categories of blessing, if you'll think of them that way, in verses 17 through 26, there is a warning, and it's twofold. The first warning was about the people in the land. Verse 17, don't say in your heart, these nations are greater than I. Verse 18, don't be afraid of them. Verse 21, don't dread them. Don't be concerned about these people who you think are greater than you or bigger than you in number or even in size. And while for them it is people, it's not just people, it's also the circumstances that stand between them and the rest that is promised to them in the promised land. And so it is kind of a picture of sanctification. Here, God has promised this before you, and here's where you are now. And in between, there are giants, if you will, that must be slayed. There's war to be done. Don't be afraid of that. Don't dread it. Why? Verse 18, you shall well remember what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all of Egypt. Remember how God laid those obstacles down, how he laid the gods of the Egyptians down, how he conquered them and dismantled them and distinguished Israel from the Egyptians as he did it and distinguished himself from all the gods of Egypt. Not only that, verse 21, don't dread them, for the Lord your God is in your midst, a great and awesome God. God is still with you. He has not abandoned you. And he rules even to the point of being able to command hornets, verse 20. He'll send the hornets against them. If they go and hide, the hornets will go and find them. Here's his rule, extends over all of creation, even the hornet. So don't dread them. We know the accounts of the Exodus. We know the accounts of the wilderness wanderings. And we know the accounts of God's faithfulness. But I do find it one thing to read those accounts of God's dealings with Israel and his faithfulness to them, and even to look and rejoice in that. It's one thing to see that and read that, and it's another thing to believe God in my own fight against whatever circumstances I'm dealing with, to believe him in the fight against sin, to believe him in the pursuit of holiness, that he's the same. But he is. He doesn't change. So to them, to us, don't be afraid, don't dread them. I'm in your midst. The second warning was against the gods of the peoples in the land. Verse 25 and 26. The graven images of their gods you are to burn with fire. You shall not covet the silver or the gold that is on them, nor take it for yourselves, or you will be snared by it, for it is an abomination to the Lord your God. You shall not bring an abomination into your house, and like it come under the ban. You shall utterly detest it, and you shall utterly abhor it, for it is something banned. So don't dread the people and don't dread the people's gods. Here are, their solution to the problems that they face. We need better crops. There's, a pagan god for that. We need rain. There's a pagan god for that. Here are all their answers to that. And there's the warning not to be allured by these things. and not even to want the gold or the silver that's on them. As they encounter these false gods, they're to completely destroy them, including the silver and the gold. The warning is not a superstitious warning, like you could catch cooties from that kind of, it's not that. The warning is real and substantial. Our hearts have a propensity to wander from God. And these false idols have the propensity to seduce us away from God. And so God sees this and He warns us, this is abominable to me, and you should abhor it. You shouldn't even want the silver and the gold that is attached to it. And so He commands that it be completely destroyed. It's under the ban, verse 26 says, which is the same kind of word that was applied to the stuff that was in Jericho that they weren't to touch, and Achan did. It's all to be destroyed. It's under the ban. And if you bring it into your house, and you're under the ban also, stay away from it. When He says not to covet it, I don't think it's just a financial warning. Like don't desire to financially prosper by taking the silver and gold of that idol. But it is a warning about being allured or fascinated by these idols. Don't open your heart and your mind to these things. Don't think, don't toy with the thoughts. Maybe, like rubbing a rabbit's foot, maybe that could give me good fortune in the land. Maybe God and that would be good for me. And so don't even look that direction, not because of superstition. Don't look that direction in the sense of don't open your heart to that kind of possibility, because it will be a snare for you. Verse 25 says that it is an abomination to the Lord. He hates it. It's a false deity. It is counter to who He is. It is completely abominable to Him. And it's an abomination to Him also because right before He says it's an abomination to Him, it will be a snare to you. It's abominable to Him because it tends to lure our hearts away from Him to other things. So He tells us again in verse 26 to abhor it. You hate it because God hates it. Hate it because it tends to draw your heart away from Him and giving Him all that He deserves. So, in a sense, for love of His own honor, but also for love of your soul, God commands you stay away from it. It's not good for you. Don't be allured by it. And we, for love of God and love of our own souls, are to obey and stay away from it. And it's for love that God commands us these things. Verse 11 of chapter 7, therefore you shall keep the commandment and the statutes and the judgments which I am commanding you today to do them. And in chapter 8, verse 6, therefore you shall keep the commandments of the Lord your God, to walk in His ways and to fear Him. God holds before them promised blessing. He reminds them of past blessing. And in all of His dealings with them, He's been gracious, He's been faithful, and that calls for a response from us. And the response it calls for is one of love and faith. We trust that He continues to be what He's always been. And for love of Him, we pursue Him with all of our being, and we turn away from all its faults. Well, let's turn to Him this morning in prayer and ask Him to help us as we settle our hearts on Him.